Hello and welcome to another episode of The Ambassador. I'm your favorite host, Pastor Larry Amodia. As usual, it's my job and duty as African Television to take you to the different countries in Africa. Today, I'm physically in the office of the Ambassador of Ghana. Our guest today on The Ambassador is the Ghanaian Ambassador to the Netherlands, His Excellency Dr. Tony Ido. Now, Ghana, as you know it, is a very diplomatic country. Ghana ranks number one when we talk about diplomacy and peace in Africa. So it's my pleasure and my honor to introduce to you today on The Ambassador, His Excellency Dr. Tony Ido. How are you, sir?
I'm fine, thank you, Reverend, and you are most welcome. And I feel privileged to be in front of your cameras.
Thank you, sir. You recently took over the job here in The Hague. Could you tell us a little bit about the man, Dr. Ido, your previous position and your task before coming to the Netherlands?
Well, I'm Tony Ido, and as you just said, currently the Ghana's ambassador extraordinary and plenipotentiary in the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I assumed my post in May this year, and I would say that I've matured now. Yeah. My previous engagements were all in the public service. I started work in the public service of Ghana in 1981 when I went to teach at the University of Cape Coast. I was a lecturer there for 10 years. And then I was nominated to go to the Consultative Assembly. And I believe that's when my political career began. I represented the Central Region branch of the Committee for Defense of the Revolution under Jerry John Rawlings. And from then on, I became a director at the National Development Planning Commission. I believe maybe I was reluctant to go into politics, but because I had a rather personal, special relationship with former President Rawlings, and inevitably, I was pushed into politics. Prior to coming here, I was a senior presidential advisor at the Office of the President, responsible for policy evaluation and monitoring. I've also served as Deputy Minister of Defense in the government of Ghana. In short,
it sounds like we could write a whole book about your career. I'm mostly interested about your economic aspect. You held an office in Ghana that has something to do with advising on economic affairs. Could you tell us about that?
Well, not necessarily economic affairs, but on developmental issues.
Okay.
As director at the National Development Planning Commission, my responsibility had to deal with integrated policy relative to development planning in Ghana. And I was part of the team that developed our first broad objectives, development objectives, which we then call Ghana Vision 2020. Out of the Ghana Vision 2020, we teased out the first directive for both sector level and district level planning, the first step. And then, of course, I was asked by the president to go to the Ministry of Defense as the deputy minister.
Your Excellency, when we talk about developmental policies, could you tell me where you see Ghana in 20 years in terms of development and comparing these to other African countries around the region?
The respectable growth rates that we have achieved over the past, I would say almost 30 years now, because pre-1981 growth was nothing to talk about. The economy had really degenerated. We were registering as low as minus 2% growth, but since 1981, we have maintained on an annual basis an average of 5% growth. At one time in 2012, we achieved a growth rate of 14%. This has come down considerably as a result of the fiscal problems that we've been having. But then, as a developing country with a lot of demand relative to infrastructural development and so on and so forth, you find that the responsibility of the government to cater for both social welfare needs and also the growth requirements of the economy are quite Herculean. So the current deficit is not a strange one. What is important is for us to bridge the gap, recover stability, and continue. Even in the midst of the physical hardships, we are still maintaining about 5% growth. Now, relative to our relations with the rest of the world, it has been Ghana's policy that Ghana's economic growth and development must be apace with the growth and development of the whole of Africa. At least that was the philosophical orientation of our first president, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. In this regard, Africa comes first so far as the development of the continent is concerned. And we try as much as possible to maintain a high level of economic cooperation with our brothers and sisters in other African countries. I think our concern for the rapid development of the African continent has also led us to the position where our foreign policies has been essentially one of non-alignment. Ghana was a founding father of the non-aligned movement at the Afro-Asian Bandung Conference. Mm-hmm. We have been a member of any organization whose orientation is towards international peace and security, and we hope to maintain that. And we have demonstrated this amply in the fact that over the past, at least since 1950, Ghana has been the most consistent contributor to UN peacekeeping operations. Every year, on a rotational basis, we send a battalion. We've been virtually in all the trouble spots of the world, be it Bosnia, be it Lebanon, be it the Congo, Central Africa, and so on and so forth. We in Ghana are for peace.
If I may ask you, Your Excellency, what are the trouble spots, in your opinion, that Ghana has to address now? Because it appears that Ghana has attained a level of a social or international reputation for being a country of democracy as a poster child for Africa. I'd like to know, how did Ghana get to this point? And in spite of where you are now, what are the trouble spots that you think Ghana needs to address to maintain this poster child reputation?
Well, Ghana is by nature, or Ghanaians by nature, are very peace-loving people. And therefore, it's not surprising that we have been fortunate enough to be the island of political stability in the sea of political turbulence in Africa. But that does not mean that we don't have our own internal problems. We have skirmishes, little intertribal conflicts. Most of the conflicts center around chieftaincy disputes and land disputes. But we manage to keep this on a very limited threshold, with the effect that they don't spill over into a nationwide conflict. I mean, conflict in society, as we all know, is ubiquitous. You cannot avoid it. But what is important is that you have an effective means of conflict resolution.
Yes.
And then, as you yourself mentioned, so far as democracy is concerned, I believe that Ghana can lay claim to being democratically matured, at least since 1992. We have had 4 successive changes of government, 2 within the same party and 2 between parties. And if demonstration of democracy is in terms of how a country changes government through the ballot box, I think we have passed the mark.
But could you, in your experience as the Deputy Minister of Defense, could you lay claim to how you actually, as a way of teaching or encouraging other African nations, how, in your opinion, did Ghana attain this status? What was done internally to put Ghana in the forefront of democracy?
On our national emblem, since we attained independence in 1957, stand the 2 words freedom and justice. In 1992, we added another dimension to the word justice, social justice. I think these are 3 keywords that define the means by which Ghana has maintained internal peace and stability. Try to more or less be accountable to your source of power, and try to be just to all manner of people across the society. Govern without special preference for people relative to tribe, religion, and so on and so forth. Our high level or high sense of social justice is perhaps a very important plank in our achievement as a peaceful, democratic country. And also, it's our desire for rapid economic growth and development, especially under circumstances when the economy is expanding in turbulent areas like energy and the exploitation of our oil resources in commercial quantities. The factor of social justice become very, very important.
So, social justice policies have helped Ghana to attain this position as a diplomatic country in Africa. But now let's look at the economic aspect of Ghana. Are you able to export freely? What does Ghana need to increase its exports image to the rest of the world? And perhaps we also want to look at, what do you really think Ghana has to offer the rest of the world in areas of export?
Well, Ghana has been well known as a leading cocoa exporter, a leading gold exporter, a leading timber exporter. We are trying to diversify the national economy away from these traditional exports because they don't hold the key to our future economic growth and development. What is important is that we must put in motion the process of expanding the economy, especially the industrial and manufacturing base. To this extent, Ghana has been strenuously campaigning for inflows of direct foreign investment. We do not want the direct foreign investment to go to the extractive industries, because over the years we have found that these industries don't help us. Foreign capital go into gold mining and so on and so forth. What comes out is that the net benefit to both the mining communities and the economy is quite minimal. So we want to expand the industrial base. And over the years, most recently, you find that it's no longer cocoa exports that is the leading foreign exchange earner, but services. But the services have been in terms of the hospitality industry and communication. We wish that the industrial sector will also grow apace with the service sector. We also want our agriculture to expand beyond small-scale peasant farming to large-scale commercial farms. And the government, in its recent outreach, recently the president was in London attending a trade conference, and then he was also in Norway. The messages that we carry to all these conferences is that Ghana has a very buoyant agriculture, or at least in terms of abundance of arable land. We have a large labor population, which at the moment tend to be either underemployed or unemployed, resident mainly in the urban areas, and they are available for work. And any foreign investor who want to go into agriculture would definitely receive the support of the government. We not only want to improve our agro-industrial sectors, but we also want a situation where, on the basis of public-private partnership, local traditional authorities, the government, and the youth in our country can find partnership, join in establishing enterprises, export-oriented enterprises, because the Ghanaian economy would not modernize without the modernization of agriculture. And the prospects are far better in agriculture. You know, anybody who has been a student of development studies will tell you that an underdeveloped country is the most promising country, simply because by virtue of its underdevelopment, there are considerable virgin areas
to be exploited,
crying for exploitation. And there is also one thing that we must bear in mind. To the extent that an underdeveloped country like Ghana has been enjoying between 5% and sometimes 14% rate of gross domestic rate of growth in GDP, then how do you think it will do when it even modernized 5%, 10% beyond the current rate? And take a comparative view that since the end of the Second World War, no developed economy in the West or in Asia has grown beyond 2% GDP per annum. The implication is that those matured economies have reached a point of stagnation. And therefore, history is with the underdeveloped countries. Underdevelopment means progressive economies.
Now, when we talk about underdevelopment, the unemployment rate in Ghana, how do you think foreign investment or foreign partners can help to reduce the unemployment rate? Do you have a road plan from the international community to address this unemployment rate?
Part of our unemployment problem has arisen because of lack of adequate training, postgraduate adequate training, so far as persons with higher levels of education are concerned. You see, we must understand that the difference between a skilled and unskilled person is just one of training. If a person is illiterate, it's because he has not had adequate education. And education means training. If a person comes out of the university with a degree and still can't find a job, it means that he doesn't have entrepreneurial skills. Training, yes. And therefore is probably dependent upon direct employment by another entity. So the government has set up a youth employment and entrepreneurial schemes to train those who have not been trained, whether they are university graduates without entrepreneurial skills, to give them the means of becoming entrepreneurs. Those who need to be employed by other entities, all that we wish from these entities is that they apply the principle of fair wages for work of equal value. Don't come and say that because we have abundant supply of labor and that the cost of labor is cheap, you are going to exploit our people. You'll find that the average Ghanaian worker is very intolerant of this situation. Right now, we even have a problem on the FPSO wells, where Ghanaian workers on the oil rig are more or less engaged in an industrial action, yes, because their European counterparts are getting almost 100 times what they are getting. I think the sense of social justice must permeate every aspect of our social fabric.
Yeah, but my major concern in the issue of unemployment with Ghana is what can be done from the international community. Like, what does Ghana need from foreign counterparts to quell or reduce the ratio of unemployment? Do you need, but we also have to be cautious here, because dependency on the international community is also one of the issues that I think as Africans we need to really reduce. So if you could tell us the level of dependency on international aid from Ghana, what is your perspective or the government policy on dependency on foreign aid?
Well, I believe that the age of foreign aid as a vehicle for development has come and gone. We are in the age of fair trade. So what we require from our foreign development partners is a fair crack of the whip. Economic and trade relations in which we no longer have beggar my neighbor policies and so on and so forth. The democratization of international economic relations in conformity with the democratization of our political economies in Africa, as has been demanded by our development partners. And over the past 30 years or almost, African countries desirous of political stability have been democratized. Unfortunately, there have been no complementary democratization of the global economy. And when this happens, what is going to be the negative effect is that the African economies will stagnate under circumstances of heightened political awareness of the people. And they say a hungry man is an angry man.
But in actuality, if we look at the foreign aid, we live in the Netherlands where the business practice is mostly that of NGOs and grants and subsidies and funds. And I'm aware of certain organizations giving aid to African countries such as Nigeria, Ghana, and the rest. But do you think that Africa or Ghana is actually prepared to hands off the aid, hands open and feeding from the international community? Do you think we are there yet?
The level of aid that African countries have been receiving has been dropping. Seriously dropping. Yes.
Yeah, but are we really, is Ghana able to say absolutely no to any type of subsidy and grants?
Oh, taking into account the responsibilities of the government for social services, for infrastructural development, limited revenue, and so on and so forth, aid can never be gainsaid. But what you're saying is that the developmental relationships between us and development partners should not be that of aid, but fair trade.
Fair trade. Fair enough. The OPCW, is Ghana, do you have a permanent representation
I
at
am the
OPCW?
permanent representation of Ghana to the Organization for Protection of Chemical Weapons.
African countries, do you think that African countries are fully aware of the objectives of the OPCW? As a permanent rep, could you tell us the position of Africa?
Well, we are because we have a very high African representation there, and each geographical area has its own quota. Recently, for instance, I had to compromise when I put in Ghana's application to be on a council, but then I took into account that Algeria, Libya, and I think Morocco happen to be incident countries, and therefore there was a need for them to have another term. So you can see the high level of interest of African countries in there. You see, Reverend, the interesting thing maybe is, how shall I say, may be seen as a paradox. But in as much as the African continent has been a continent of conflict and so on and so forth, you have found that successive governments have been, have shown interest in international organizations. I don't want to make a statement that probably will be considered as diplomatic FUPA, but we find countries like the United States of America that leads the fight against
chemical weapons
and so on and so forth. And yet these countries have never ever been signatories of any international treaty. Whether we're dealing with environmental pollution and so on and so forth, the USA has never ratified any of this. And yet African countries are ready to support all these organizations. We have demonstrated our internationalism far better than those who occupied the permanencies at the Security Council. You know, and I believe that it is not fair. So far as internationalism is concerned, I think there must be reward for those who support the growth of world peace and security.
Would you say that as and I think this borders down to your position or your former position as a Minister of Defense, Deputy Minister of Defense, do you think that Ghana or most African countries are cultured to identify chemical weapons or mass production of chemical weapons in their backyard? What is the OPCW's
what do you
position.
mean cultured?
Well, if someone is producing,
We have chemical weapon industries, chemical industries in our country.
yes,
We have the technical ability if we have technical ability to produce chemicals, then we should have the technical ability to transfer these chemicals into chemical weapons. So it's not a question of having the culture or the
no. Actually, my question is to identify when there is a mass production of chemical weapon as against the objectives of the OPCW. If in the backyard of Ghana in the farm, somebody from Syria is producing mass weapon of destruction, are the Africans or the government trained to identify such production?
Well, integral with the member states' obligations within the OPCW is the responsibility of actually creating legislation and institutions that not only detect but also prevent the production of chemical weapons. And where the member country doesn't have the resources or technical capacity, the OPCW has an obligation to assist that country. In the end, the objectives of the OPCW will be defeated if the individual member countries cannot be the first line of
defense or identification,
detection and prevention.
Well, fair enough. On greener pastures, Ghana is being appointed or selected by African television viewers as the democratic country of the year 2014. Would you give us your comment on that?
Honored. We are very, very honored and pleased. And well, so far I haven't seen any official communication to that effect. When I do, I'll inform my ministry in Accra and presidency. And until that is done, let me anticipate the event and say thank you very much.
Very good. And as the ambassador in the Netherlands, as a Ghanaian, I'm watching this interview right now, and the embassy exists in the Netherlands. What should I expect from the ambassador or the embassy as a Ghanaian? What services, of what good is the embassy to me as a Ghanaian living in the Netherlands?
Okay, first of all, this embassy is selling Ghana in the most positive light, not only to the population and institutions of the host country, but also to all entities that reside or pass through the Netherlands. Secondly, we maintain our responsibility to Ghanaians or people of Ghanaian origin, whether they have naturalized as Dutch persons or not, because we cannot cut our cultural and traditional ties from them. They not only maintain cultural and traditional ties, but they are also our blood brothers and sisters. This embassy will extend, whenever we are called upon, necessary consular services for either the protection of the life and property of Ghanaians here, or for the prevention of any behavior that would tarnish the image of our mother country, Ghana, in the face of foreign people and entities.
While waiting for this interview, we saw quite a lot of Dutch or foreigners in your reception room, and they were all engaged in the business of visa and picking up passport for visa. It appears that visits to Ghana is thriving. Could you tell us, if we were to go to Ghana as a foreigner, what is there for foreigners in Ghana?
Well, Ghana is most decidedly one of Africa's leading tourism business destinations. You have people who are, shall I say, known worldwide for their friendliness. We have a land that is most receptive to all kinds of vacational activities, good beaches, especially in the western region. Ecotourism in Ghana has considerable attractive sites, and indeed, Ghana, like most other African countries, is an adventure in itself, a terrain that is waiting to be explored, but not explored in the colonial sense, but explored in the partnership sense. We want people who come to Ghana to consider themselves as partners of Ghana, not only in economic sense, but also in the developmental sense.
So what are the incentives by the Ministry of Investment or Trade for a foreigner to say, I'm packing my bag, I'm a Dutchman, and I have 20, 30, 50,000 euros. What is an incentive for me to say Ghana is the destination for investment?
Well, the incentives are quite a lot. I've already mentioned a few in the areas of agriculture and so on and so forth. And throughout the trade conferences that our president and have been attending, and some of us have been attending, we more or less provide the necessary literature and the brochures. 3 days ago, I was in a trade conference, and I was billed to more or less have 4 interviews. I ended up with 14 matchmaking interviews, unscheduled, and everybody sees the flag and they want to come and talk to Ghana. And in the end, I've had no less than 14 special requests.
Beautiful.
Which I am sending to Accra for the necessary contacts to be made. February, come next year, February 13th, February to be precise, a trade delegation organized by the Ghana Chamber of Commerce and Industry will be coming to the Netherlands. So, Reverend, let me use this opportunity to put it in the domain. Then there is also going to be a follow-up, which will be more or less a return of the compliment to the Dutch, when I think in June, the Dutch sent a trade delegation led by Mrs. Plowman, and I believe our Ministry for Trade and Industry would also return the compliment to come bring a delegation here. 2015. The biggest obstacle is the right power and willingness of the big powers to derogate from the responsibilities that is incumbent upon them by the Rome Treaty. The United States of America, for instance, has been derogating by concluding bilateral treaties with individual countries, that if you come across a situation where an American citizen or institution is being accused of the offenses under the ICC, I signed a treaty that you should not send the person to ICC, but send it to my country. That's derogation.
Send him to the USA.
To the USA. That's derogation. And then alongside such derogation, they also have the power of the veto. So if a surrogate country of theirs or a protege also is accused of the same thing, you'll find that they will veto any resolution in the Security Council and so on and so forth. So currently we are having incidents in the Middle East and so on and so forth, and they are making no progress so far as the ICC is concerned. And that's why the spotlight is always in Africa. Maybe because of our relative weakness. my modest suggestion is that perhaps it's about time African countries went back to the system we adopted in the 1960s to get the United Nations Convention on Human Rights, etc., firmly entrenched. That's when we formed the Group of 77. And through the activities of the Group of 77 at the General Assembly of the country, we managed to dismantle the unfair international trade systems like the GATT, General Agreement of Trade and Tariff. And we brought in UNCTAD. Those were good strategies. And I believe that the issues of the ICC probably must be tabled at the General Assembly, where the big powers cannot bully us and have the veto power to jettison any reformist proposal. There at the General Assembly, I believe those who want progress on the war against international terrorism and in particular state terrorism would be more than those who want to stagnate the system.
Where is the African Union in all of this? It appears that you've just outlined some very serious challenges that African countries are facing when it comes to international treaties and organizations. But is this not part of the objective of the African Union? Well, where is the African Union in all of this? Are we saying we have a toothless African Union?
I suppose so. It has had its teething problems. The African Union was conceived by such stalwarts as Nkrumah, Jomo Kenyatta, and others. Where are they now? So now a lot of lip service has been paid. Even if we have to have our own headquarters built by a foreign entity, the Chinese, then where is the African Union? I am a functionary of the African Union. I'm a member of the African Union's Advisory Board on Corruption. As I sit here now, for 1 whole year now, the board has not met. And this is not a full-time board. How can the organ function if the board doesn't have meetings? We can't have meetings because there's no money to support the meetings.
You just outlined some challenges, Excellency. Let me hear 3 solutions, and that's it. 3 solutions to our international global issues.
Increased coordination of the activities and affairs of African countries among African countries. Less bickering among ourselves. Let us behave in the biblical way. We are each other's brothers. Each
brothers keepers.
Keeper. These are my 3 solutions.
I'd like to thank you, Doctor, Your Excellency.
Thank you.
We really appreciate your cooperation with African television since your arrival. You're one ambassador that we're proud to be friend of, and African TV is a friend of Ghana. We will always be there when you call us.
Surely you flatter me.
I'd like to thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyway. Thank you.
Well, folks, it's been a good 1 hour with His Excellency Dr. Tony Aido, the ambassador of the Kingdom of Ghana to the Kingdom of the Netherlands. And this is the ambassador. As you know, my job is to go out there and bring you the real meat from the horse's mouth. I go to the horse's mouth and I take the meat and I bring them to you. So until the next country and next time, stay blessed. God bless you.